The wind howled over the river Kebar, stirring the dust into spectral spirals. It was a hot, restless wind, heavy with the scent of distant storms. The river itself, swollen from the last season's flood, coiled like a serpent through the land of the exiles. Its waters were dark, sluggish, a mirror to the despair of the people who now called Babylon their prison. Among them was a man named Ezekiel, son of Buzi, a priest, once meant to serve in the great temple of Jerusalem. But there was no temple here, no altar, no holy of holies, only the distant gleam of Babylonian towers, rising like alien gods against the horizon. It had been 5 years since King Jehoiachin was taken, 5 years since Ezekiel and his people had been ripped from their land, their dreams crushed beneath the iron heel of Nebuchadnezzar. And yet, as Ezekiel stood by the river, staring into its dark waters, something in the air changed. A stillness, a charge, like the moment before lightning splits the sky. Then the heavens opened. A great light tore across the sky, a brilliance beyond fire, beyond the sun itself. Ezekiel staggered back, his heart hammering against his ribs. The wind shifted, no longer aimless but alive, as if the very breath of God had entered the world. And then the vision began. A storm rose from the north. It moved like a churning sea of fire, a massive whirlwind, rolling across the sky like a living thing. From within it, flashes of lightning erupted, searing through the air with a force that sent tremors through Ezekiel's bones. But it was not the storm that stole his breath. From the heart of the fire they emerged. 4 beings, neither human nor beast, neither angel nor demon, but something greater. Each stood towering, radiant, their forms flickering like molten bronze. They burned, yet they were not consumed, their very presence woven with flame and light. Ezekiel's hands trembled as he beheld them. Each being had 4 faces. One Gamia son, a man, noble and solemn. One, a lion, its golden mane a corona of fire. One, a ox, massive, unshaken. And one, an eagle, its piercing gaze fixed upon the endless horizon. And they did not stand still. They moved, not as men move, not with steps or strides, but with impossible precision, gliding, shifting, advancing without turning. Wherever they willed to go, they went, swift as thought, perfect in motion. Ezekiel fell to his knees, his lips parting in a whisper that he did not understand. The 4 creatures did not speak, but their presence spoke of something greater, a power that no king could wield, a force that no army could match, a will that no man could stand against. Then Ezekiel saw their wings. Each being had 4 wings, 2 stretched high, touching the sky, and 2 that covered their bodies in reverence. When they moved, their wings beat like the sound of rushing waters, like the roar of 1,000 waterfalls. And beneath them, not ordinary wheels, wheels within wheels. The wheels burned with a radiance like topaz, each one spinning within another, a divine mechanism beyond the understanding of men. And they were alive. Ezekiel could feel it. They were not mere objects, not chariots for the divine. They were part of the creatures themselves, an extension of their presence, their power. Where the living beings moved, the wheels moved with them. Where the living beings turned, the wheels turned with them. They did not pivot, they did not hesitate, they flowed, as though the laws of the world bent before their command. And within the wheels, eyes, thousands of them, staring, watching, all seeing, not the eyes of men, nor of beasts, but something eternal. Ezekiel felt them piercing through him, peeling back flesh and thought, gazing into the depths of his soul. He could not hide from them. He could not shield himself. And then he heard the voice. A sound like thunder, like roaring waters, like the heartbeat of creation itself. It was not coming from the creatures. It was coming from above them. High above the creatures, high above the storm, high above the wheels and the fire, there was a throne. A throne like sapphire, like a jewel torn from the very foundation of the heavens. And upon that throne sat a figure. He was not like the creatures. He was not like the wheels. He was beyond them. His form burned like fire, wrapped in radiance, too vast, too holy to behold. And yet, Ezekiel knew this was the Lord, not the carved idols of Babylon, not the false gods of the nations. This was Him, the I Am, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, of Jacob, the one who had spoken to Moses in the fire, the one who had led Israel by the pillar of flame, the one whose glory no temple could contain. Ezekiel's body collapsed beneath the weight of His presence. And in that moment, he understood. This was not a vision of the future. This was not a dream of things to come. This was reality. The unseen revealed. The hidden unveiled. The Lord was not far away. He was here, now, and He was speaking. The world beneath Ezekiel had vanished. The river, the exiled people, the distant towers of Babylon, all had melted away into insignificance. There was only this place now, a realm where fire burned without consuming, where wheels within wheels turned endlessly, and where living creatures with four faces moved as one, bound to the eternal will of the Almighty. And above them, the throne. It loomed high above the storm, its sapphire radiance casting light over all creation, and upon it sat a figure, a presence more terrifying than anything Ezekiel had ever known. His form burned like molten fire, wrapped in a radiance that no mortal could withstand. From the waist down he was flame, from the waist up blinding light, as though he had been shaped from the very essence of the sun. And then he spoke. A voice like the rushing of mighty waters, like the roar of a great army, like the breath of eternity itself. It was not a sound that could be merely heard. It filled Ezekiel, shaking the very marrow of his bones, sending shockwaves through his soul. Son of man, stand on your feet, and I will speak with you. A surge of power flooded Ezekiel's limbs. His trembling body, broken beneath the weight of the vision, was lifted, not by his own strength, but by something unseen, something greater. He stood, and the Lord continued. The one on the throne leaned forward, and suddenly a hand stretched toward Ezekiel, a hand that held a scroll. But this was no ordinary parchment. It was covered in writing, not only on the front, but on the back as well, every inch filled with words, and the words were lamentations, mourning, and woe. The doom of nations was written upon it. The sins of Israel were recorded in its lines. The judgment of God was inscribed in its depths. And the voice from the throne commanded, "Eat this scroll, Son of Man. Take my words into your very being." Ezekiel's hands shook as he reached for it. Eat it? It was a message of destruction, a prophecy of sorrow. Should it not be bitter to the taste? But as the scroll touched his lips, he was filled with an unexpected sweetness, like honey on his tongue. For even in judgment, the word of the Lord was good. Even in destruction, His justice was perfect. And Ezekiel knew he had been chosen. The vision faded. The fire, the creatures, the throne, all vanished into the heavens like the last traces of a dream. And Ezekiel found himself once more on the banks of the river Chebar, his knees pressing into the dust. The air was heavy with the scent of earth and water. The sun burned low, a dying ember sinking behind the horizon. Had it been minutes, hours, days? The exiles still moved about their daily routines, filling jars with water, tending to their meager fields, murmuring to one another in hushed voices. They had seen nothing. Only Ezekiel had beheld the throne of God. And now he was no longer just a priest. He was a prophet, a messenger of fire, a voice calling to a people who would not listen. The wind had shifted. Where once it carried the scent of Babylon's rivers, now it felt like the breath of judgment. The sky stretched overhead, vast and indifferent, and Ezekiel, no longer just a man, no longer just a priest, stood trembling in its shadow. The glory of the Lord had passed over him, had consumed him, had left him hollowed and filled all at once. He had seen the living creatures, the wheels within wheels, the throne of sapphire, and the fire that did not burn. And now he was left in the dust, staring at the ordinary world around him, yet knowing that nothing was ordinary anymore. The voice of God still echoed within him, shaking his bones, pressing into the marrow of his being. And then it spoke again. "Son of man, I am sending you to the people of Israel, to a rebellious nation that has revolted against me." Ezekiel swallowed. "They and their ancestors have been in rebellion against me to this very day. They are obstinate, hard-hearted." The words burned in the air, each one a brand searing itself into Ezekiel's soul. The Lord was not calling him to an easy path. He was not sending him to a people eager to hear truth. He was sending him to the deaf, to the blind, to the proud, a nation that had turned its face from the Almighty and now stood on the precipice of judgment. And yet, Ezekiel had to go. The Lord's voice grew like rolling thunder. "Do not be afraid of them. Do not be afraid of their words, though briars and thorns are all around you, and you live among scorpions." The words cut through him. Briars, thorns, scorpions. Ezekiel saw them in his mind, not literal creatures, but the faces of men twisted in defiance, the eyes of kings, the scowls of priests, the hardened expressions of elders who would mock him, reject him, threaten him. And yet, he was not to fear them. "You must speak my words to them, whether they listen or fail to listen, for they are a rebellious people." This was not a mission of success. It was a mission of obedience. Ezekiel would stand before men who would call him a madman, a traitor, a liar, and he would still have to speak. He would thunder warnings that would fall upon deaf ears. He would paint visions that would be met with laughter and scorn. He would cry out in the name of the Lord, and the world would hate him for it. And yet he could not remain silent. For a fire had been placed within him, and it would burn his soul to ashes if he tried to hold it back. Then the Lord's hand was upon him again. Ezekiel staggered, a great weight pressing him down. Something was happening to him. His tongue grew heavy, his lips felt sealed. When he opened his mouth to speak, no sound came forth, not a whisper, not a breath. And the Lord spoke. "I will make your tongue stick to the roof of your mouth, so that you will be silent and unable to rebuke them, for they are a rebellious people." Ezekiel's eyes widened in horror. He could not speak, he could not call out, he could not warn his fellow exiles of what was coming. Until God willed it. Until the word of the Lord came to him, forcing itself past his lips like an unrelenting storm. His voice would not belong to him anymore. It would belong to heaven, and it would come only when the Lord decreed it. He would be silent until it was time to proclaim judgment. The vision was not over. The Lord spoke again. "Son of man, go now to the people of Israel and speak my words to them. You are not being sent to a people of obscure speech or strange language, but to your own people. They will not listen to you, for they do not listen to me." The words struck like iron. Ezekiel would be sent to his own people, to his fellow exiles, to those who should listen, to those who would not. "But I will make you as unyielding as they are. The fire grew in his chest. The word of God filled him, and he was no longer his own. The wind swept over the plains of Babylon, carrying the distant echoes of a world Ezekiel no longer belonged to. He had been chosen. He had been marked by fire. He had eaten the scroll of lamentation, tasted the sweetness of divine truth, and felt its weight settle into his soul. And now, he would bear that weight for all of Israel. The voice of the Lord spoke again, filling the air like rolling thunder. Son of man, I have made you a watchman for the house of Israel. Whenever you hear a word from my mouth, you must give them warning from me. A watchman. Ezekiel's heart pounded. He knew what that meant. A watchman stood on the walls, high above the city, his eyes fixed on the horizon. When danger approached, when the enemy's banners darkened the sky, it was his duty to cry out. But if the watchman saw the coming doom and remained silent, if he let the sword of judgment fall without warning the people, then their blood would be on his hands. The Lord's voice pressed against Ezekiel's chest like an iron weight. If I say to the wicked, you will surely die, and you do not warn them, they will perish for their sin, but I will hold you accountable for their blood. A tremor ran through Ezekiel's spine. This was not just prophecy. This was life and death. And the burden of Israel's fate now rested upon his shoulders. But the Lord had not finished. His call would not be just words, it would be actions. Strange actions, shocking actions, signs that would be burned into the memory of every exile. The voice came again. Son of man, take a clay tablet and set it in front of you. Draw the city of Jerusalem upon it. Ezekiel obeyed, pressing his fingers into the soft clay, carving out the walls, the gates, the temple. He could see it in his mind. The city that once was, the city that now stood under siege by the armies of Babylon. Now, build siege works against it, set up battering rams, surround it with ramps and camps of soldiers. With careful hands, Ezekiel built a miniature battlefield. When the exiles passed by, they would see the tiny Jerusalem under siege. They would whisper, they would murmur, "What is he doing?" Then the Lord commanded him, "Lie down on your left side and bear the sin of Israel upon yourself. For 390 days you shall lie on your left side, 1 day for each year of their sin." The words struck Ezekiel like a hammer. 390 days? But he did not question. He did not resist. And so for over a year, Ezekiel lay beside the clay model of Jerusalem, his body curled in the dust, bearing the weight of Israel's sin. And then 40 more days on his right side for the sins of Judah. The people of Babylon watched. They laughed. They sneered. They whispered that he had gone mad. But still Ezekiel remained. And when he finally stood again, the voice of the Lord commanded him once more, "Now shave your head and beard with a sword." A priest's beard was his honor, a sign of his calling. But Ezekiel took the blade and cut it away, letting the strands fall into the wind. And then the Lord said, "Divide the hair into 3 parts. 1/3 burn in the fire. 1/3 strike with the sword. 1/3 scatter to the wind." The exiles watched in horror as he did exactly that. And then the final sign. "Take a small remnant of the hair and tuck it into your robe. These I will preserve." A remnant. A few saved from the fire. The exiles understood now. Most of Israel would be consumed. Most would be slain by the sword. Most would be scattered among the nations. But a few would remain. One night, as Ezekiel lay in silence, the visions returned. Once more he saw the temple of Jerusalem, but this time something was wrong. The priests still offered sacrifices, but their hands were defiled. The altars still smoked with incense, but the fragrance was rotten. The courts were filled, but they worshipped false gods. And above the temple the Lord's presence hovered. The same presence Ezekiel had seen on the sapphire throne, the same fire and light, the same glory that once filled the tabernacle. And now it was leaving. Ezekiel saw it rise from above the cherubim, lifting higher, drifting away from the temple. The people still carried on their rituals. They still muttered their prayers. But the presence of God was departing from them, and they did not even see it. And then it was gone. The temple now just a shell. The holy city abandoned. Jerusalem alone. The voice of the Lord rang out. This city is doomed. I will bring the sword, the famine, the plague upon it. But I will leave a remnant. A few will survive, and they will remember me among the nations where I scatter them. Days passed. Months passed. Ezekiel spoke, but no one listened. Then one day the heavens opened once more. Ezekiel found himself standing in a valley, a place of endless desolation. The sky hung heavy above him, a vast stretch of grey. And beneath his feet, bones, scattered across the ground, dry, brittle, lifeless. A battlefield long since forgotten. A graveyard without tombstones. And the Lord asked him, "Son of man, can these bones live?" Ezekiel's breath caught in his throat. Could they? He did not know. So he answered, "O Lord God, only you know." And the voice commanded, "Prophesy to these bones." Ezekiel turned to the lifeless remains, stretched out his hand, and spoke. "Dry bones, hear the word of the Lord." And the valley shook. Bones clattered against one another, rising, assembling into skeletons. Flesh wrapped around them, sinews knit together, bodies took form. But still, they did not live. Then the Lord said, "Call to the breath." And Ezekiel cried out, "Come, O breath from the four winds, breathe upon these slain, that they may live." And breath entered them. The dead stood up. An army. Israel restored. The valley of dry bones faded into shadow, swallowed by the darkness of Ezekiel's vision, but the voice of the Lord had not finished speaking. The wind stirred, and suddenly he stood upon a high mountain. The sky stretched endlessly above him, its color pure and golden, as if the heavens themselves had been cleansed. Below, the land spread vast and unbroken, no longer choked by ruins or the scars of war. And before him, a temple. Not the shattered remains of Solomon's temple. Not the profaned sanctuary where false gods once stood. This was something greater. A structure perfect in symmetry, its gates towering, its courts vast, its walls shining like polished stone. And standing beside Ezekiel was a man, radiant, clothed in linen, holding a measuring rod of gold. His voice rang clear, "Son of man, behold." Ezekiel watched as the man measured the temple's walls, its courts, its gates, every detail precise, every dimension set by the will of God. But this was not just a building. It was a promise that the Lord would return, that he would dwell among his people once more, that his presence, which had departed from Jerusalem, would one day fill the sanctuary again. And then Ezekiel saw it. A light in the distance, a fire brighter than the sun, moving toward the temple from the east. The glory of the Lord. The same radiance that had burned in the whirlwind. The same fire that had rested upon the throne of sapphire. The same presence that had once abandoned the old temple, now returning. The air trembled as the glory of God entered the gates. Ezekiel fell to his face, unable to stand in the presence of the Almighty. And the voice of the Lord spoke one last time, "Son of man, this is where I will dwell forever." The exile would end. The people would return, and God would be among them again. The vision faded, and Ezekiel opened his eyes, no longer standing on a mountain, no longer in the presence of fire and lightning. He was back in Babylon. The world had not yet changed. The temple was still in ruins. Jerusalem still lay in desolation. But the promise had been made, and one day it would come to pass. Ezekiel's life would never be his own again. For years he would prophesy, warn and weep for his people. He would speak the words of judgment and later the words of hope. His message would be rejected. His warnings would be ignored. But his words would not be forgotten. And generations later, when Israel's exile ended, when Jerusalem was rebuilt, when the people returned to their land, they would remember. They would remember the man who had seen the throne of God. They would remember the valley where dead bones rose again. They would remember the temple that had not yet been built, but was promised. And one day, in the fullness of time, the promise would be fulfilled. For the glory of the Lord would return in a way no one expected, not in a temple made of stone, but in the person of the Messiah. And his presence would dwell not just in one city, but in the hearts of all who believed. Ezekiel's vision was only the beginning. The real story had yet to unfold. Thus ends the story of Ezekiel's vision, a tale of judgment, exile, restoration, and the unfailing presence of God. What was your favorite part of Ezekiel's journey? Was it the throne of sapphire, the wheels within wheels, or the valley of dry bones coming to life? Comment below and let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another story from Whispers of Heaven. Until next time, stay faithful, stay watchful, and listen for the whispers of heaven.